the reason why Israel and the Israelis and the Palestinians can't negotiate as though their problems could be solved by a real estate transaction is because they have irrational and irreconcilable claims upon land and buildings.
Do you think they're any more? Do you think they're any more irrational than the claim that glass is worth something more?
Well, no, it's like that. It's like that. But I'm saying.
But that's not irrational by your own definition. You just said that was actually constituted a fact.
Well, no, it's a fact about people, right? So there are. This is okay.
Okay.
Should be a little careful here because it gets confusing.
Yeah.
We can make objective claims about subjective experience, right? We use this word objective and subjective in different ways. We use it in epistemological ways and ontological ways. And
give me just 1 sec to make sure I'm on the same page as you.
Well, so I can illustrate by way of example. If I say that that's just your subjective opinion, right? I'm saying that this is an expression of your bias. This is true for you, but it's not true out in the world, right? That's one way I can use the subjective-objective distinction, and that's an epistemological way. Like you're ruled by bias. You're not thinking straight. I don't have to take your opinion seriously. That's subjective. I'm worried about objective facts. But people get confused. They think that objective facts only means the material world and what's really in this glass as a material object. No, we can be much more objective than that. We can make objective claims about the subjective experience of people like ourselves. I can make an infinite number of objective claims about the experience. This is the example I always use, but I just happen to love it. What was JFK thinking the moment he got shot? Right? Now that's it. We don't know, so we'll never get the data. Right? So the truth or falseness of what I'm about to say can't be predicated on actually getting access to the data because he's not around and his brain's not around to scan. But you and I both know an infinite number of things he wasn't thinking about. We can make an objective claim about his subjectivity. I know he wasn't thinking, well, I hope Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris work it out on stage that night, right? And an infinite number of things like that. He was thinking something, he was experiencing something, but we don't know what it is. So when I'm talking about this domain of value, I'm saying that it exists in this landscape of actual and possible conscious experience for human beings and any other system like us that can experience this range of suffering and happiness.
Well, okay, so and partly what I'm trying to do is to actually determine what that structure is.
Well, in our case, it's certainly connected to the evolved structure of our brain.
Yeah, but I want to go way deeper into the brain.
It's augmented by everything else we do.
I want to go way deeper into the idea than it's connected with brain states, because it's definitely connected with brain states. The question is, at least in part, how and what does that mean? And I think that the neuroscience has progressed far enough so that we can do quite a good job of this. And so, but I want to return to one thing, and maybe I'll outline a little bit of this. And when you talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you said that was irrational. And so, look, fair enough. People have been locked with their hands around each other's necks there for 3,000 years. But there's a problem there. And the problem is that people are looking at the landscape from a contextualized perspective, right? It's not just a piece of land, it's their piece of land. It's like your house or maybe your favorite shirt. It's like, well, you say, well, I have a favorite shirt. It's like, well, there's nothing inherent in the shirt that makes it your favorite. No, it's a subjective judgment. It's like, well, then is that a fact? Well, yes, it's a fact. It's a fact about subjective judgment. It's okay. Well, the Israeli claim on the land and the Palestinian claim on the land is a subjective judgment that's a fact. Yeah, it's like, so how is it irrational?
Because it is the true analogy here, the complete analogy is rather like we're about to fight over Elton John's glass, and Elton John was never here, right?
Well,
so I'm not saying so. It clearly still matters to us in our misapprehension of our situation. We still really care, and these are objectively true claims about the level at which we value things. and hence the impasse.
Well,
but it matters
I think that's
if
counterproductive dismissive. Like you could say, well,
it's really not. When you look at the specific claims, it's really not.
Look, you took the contextual interpretation to its absolute extreme. You said, well, there's multiple reasons why different people who occupy the same piece of land are going to feel about it in different ways.
Sure.
Okay,
and most of those reasons are amenable to some kind of rational compromise.
Well,
there's actually there's studies on this. I mean, there's studies done by people who I disagree with.
When you say the word rational in that context, you're using it as a black box that contains the concept proper way of thinking about it. It's like it's not so obvious in most situations what the rational approach is.
Well,
otherwise, life would be very simple.
I have an obvious one here, and that's that whatever the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews think they're getting from their attachment to their dogmatic and irreconcilable religious worldviews can be gotten just as well by a deeper understanding of our universal and non-culturally bound capacity for ethical experience, spiritual experience, community building, and we can touch that space.
What's that grounded in?
We can touch that space it's
fine.
Almost like the status quo it's almost like you're content to live in a world, or at least you're content not to judge too harshly a world where fans of rival soccer teams or baseball teams regularly kill one another over their fandom, right? Like what if that were the status quo? It's like it's been this way for thousands of years. There must be a reason for it. Right?
Look,
people really like sports.
I'm not trying to justify the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
No, but
I'm saying that
you shouldn't be too quick to judge the sanctity of their differences of opinion.
Okay, but wait a minute, Sam. There, you made a claim. Like your claim was that if the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims would just stop their stupidity and adopt this universal ethic, then everything would be okay. It's like, okay, what's the basis for the universal ethic? Like that's such.
That's a non-problem. No one's going in search of that. The truth is, that's an interesting problem for philosophers and for scientists. That's not actually where the rubber meets the road for people living their lives well. This is analogous to me.
Sure it is. It's associated in your book with the difference between the bad and the good life.
I really care about all of this, and my job as a philosopher, as a moral philosopher in that case, is to make the best case I can for these ideas. But the truth is, it is analogous to when you get into a debate with a Christian fundamentalist in the States. Very often, this person will pretend to care about cosmology or evolution as though it's the most important thing in the world, as though you can't get out of bed in the morning and figure out how to treat your friends and family well unless you figure out what happened before the Big Bang, right? No one really lives their lives that way, and yet we have convinced ourselves that this is a sensible way of talking about the conflict between religion and science.
So hold on. I think you have arrived at the core of your conflict right here, and I actually hear you both loud and clear. Your point is that if the people faced with the question were to, start with a fresh sheet of paper, look at the Middle East, they could arrive at a compromise that they as individuals might find put them way ahead and is more profitable than the situation that they are continually finding themselves in.
Yeah.
And that might be the case. On the other hand, the reason that they don't is that historically those who have been outcompeted by those who haven't. So the point is, the universe and the fact that it refuses to solve that conflict is telling us that there is some reason that people who take that prospect seriously are not actually correct in some at least metaphorical way. So in other words, what is it to have a sentimental attachment to some piece of territory somewhere? That sounds completely irrational. On the other hand, that sentimental attachment may result in you continuing for 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 years, whereas if you surrendered it because it was irrational, you might go extinct. Now, should you care that your lineage is going to go extinct? Maybe, arguably not. On the other hand, it's hard to imagine that what you're saying is so thoroughly grounded that it can justify causing people to alter their perspective on value in such a way that it might actually drive them extinct. It's not clear that that's a good
clearly,
thing.
Secularism, we're talking about the fringe here. We're talking about, when you're talking about, in this case, the Israeli settlers and the Palestinian terrorists, right? Like we should all breathe a sigh of relief that kind of passion and attachment to land doesn't characterize most of humanity.
It does if you're trying to defend your house.
So,
well, but that's
can I
kind of a
turn
different
that
topic.
back on
Yes.
Jordan? Because I think this is where the crux of it is.
Well,
so if
yes.
we follow the idea that this is actually that the seemingly sentimental and irrational attachment to the piece of land is some sort of meta-rationality, which sounds like your perspective, then we are now confronted with the question of, all right, if it is an evolved kind of meta-rationality that is being manifest in stories that cause people to behave in ways that Sam sees as clearly irrational, then we are stuck with the naturalistic fallacy, which is to say, so for those who don't know, the naturalistic fallacy says that just because something is doesn't mean it ought, right? The fact that selection favors something doesn't make it good. When the Aztecs sacrifice their enemies, it is good for continuing Aztecness, but it may not be good in some absolute moral sense. So here's the question for you.
Yep.
You're arguing for, I think, an evolutionarily very viable explanation for religious belief and dogma, but aren't you stuck with the downside of it, where much of what is encoded in that way may actually be abhorrent morally and consciously?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
No doubt about it.
what do we do about that?
Well, this is exactly
Do you have
why.
a sorting algorithm?
Yes.
What is
I'm
it?
trying to get to it.
Okay.
Okay, so this is actually why I asked Sam this question. It wasn't an attack. It's like, okay, so look, people have these belief systems, Christian, Muslim, Jew, we'll say for that, and you're saying abandon those, let's say, and move towards this transcendent rationality. It's like, okay, two problems. It's not so easy to abandon a belief system because you end up in the morally relativist, nihilist pit. And
Well,
that's a problem.
one doesn't have to. And many people don't.
people tend to, and so it's a
Well, no,
very
I mean,
major problem.
It's just not. I mean,
No, they don't have to. Look,
Wait.
Sam,
That's an empirical claim that we would
don't-
have to find out whether that's true.
well, they
but
don't-
there's
they
a lot
don't-
of evidence against that.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of evidence for it too, but it's beside the point to some degree because that isn't something that I want to quibble about. Perhaps there are transitional paths, and sometimes people find a collapse of their faith actually freeing. It's certainly the case that many of the people who are happy about what you're doing have found exactly that in what you've been saying, and more power to you. And so I'm not willing to dispute that. But what you said was, okay, here's these belief systems that are ancient and complex, and we can step outside of them, and there's this transcendent rationality that we could all aspire to that would solve the problems. It's like, okay, what is it?
Well,
what is it exactly?
It is, at a minimum, to value all of the variables that conspire to make the one life we know we have
Okay, you
worth
can't
living.
value all those variables.
Well, no, we're doing it right. We do it every day in how we organize
No, we
ourselves
don't,
in
because
society.
we apply an a priori framework to the variables to reduce them to a tiny subset that we can manage. And it's the nature of that a priori framework that we haven't been able to have a discussion about. We have an a priori framework that narrows our perception to almost nothing. It's built into us. It's partly socially constructed. It has a deep neurological substrate. And we actually understand how it emerges to a large degree. And the thing is that...
But I don't think that's actually our difference. I mean, so the a priori framework operates in many different spaces, which again, we can't necessarily analyze, but it makes it no less true. So if you put your hand on a hot stove, you will immediately feel a very good reason, in fact, an unarguably good reason to remove it, right? And it doesn't require moral philosophy to get you there. You don't need to inspect your a priori framework. You just have to feel, holy shit, this is the worst thing I've ever felt, right? And there's so many moments like that in life that we dimly understand.
What if you're trying to rescue your child from a fire?
Well, exactly. Then you have some other goal, right?
Yes,
that is going to
do.
cause you to brave that suffering, right?
Yes.
But again, trying to rescue your child from a fire is pretty close to as the hot stove in not needing to be analyzed, right? The imperative to rescue it becomes harder when you have to rescue someone else's child from a fire, and you're worried about orphaning your child who's standing next to you on the sidewalk, right? Then we get into the domain of moral philosophy, and then you can say, well, how much do each of us owe the children of other people, right? How much should I risk my life and risk orphaning my child to rescue your child? That's when things get interesting in a philosophy seminar, and that's where people begin to hesitate. People begin to, we are biased toward protecting ourselves, protecting our kin, protecting our friends, and only then do we begin to extend the circle. And again, but this is not a mystery where we want to go here. We want to extend the circle more and more and build institutions and societies that implement our best selves at our best moments more and more. It makes it more effortless to be good in the world. We want good incentives.
Can we take your example seriously here for a second?
Yeah.
All right, so you are built to be more likely to rescue your own child than someone else's child from a fire. We in society might like for the minimum number of children to die in fires as possible, which gets you to sideline that consideration in favor of, is there a child who's faced with a fire who I might rescue? Religions do exactly this restructuring of values because they say something like, actually, your goodness in risking your own life to save that other child from a fire is observed and it is calculated, and you will be rewarded for it in some way.
That's one possible benefit of some religions, right?
Good.
And again, so you put that on the balance, but I have a lot to put on the other side of the balance.
Sure you do.
Right?
I know you've got
I know how it's going to swing.
never-ending list.
Look,
right.
I want to.
Well, that's what I'm trying to point out to Jordan here, which he actually acknowledges, which is that he's got a big stack of good things that come from this heuristic, but he's also acknowledging.
But this is actually this is our core disagreement here, which is however the balance is going to swing. The difference between us here is that I think we read the utility of anything, but in this case, religious thinking, as evidence of, you read it as evidence of something, perhaps, literally true.
Inevitability. Depends on what you mean by literal.
Yeah, so and I view that as a kind of version of either the genetic or naturalistic fallacy, that it's just like, whether that's, it's useful now here for us, it doesn't argue that it's the best way of getting those good things. I mean, my argument here is that religion gives people bad reasons to be good where good reasons are available.
Okay,
right?
so
and that's a problem, right?
Right.
And because good reasons scale better than bad reasons. And I think we can even if you take the case where religion is clearly useful in a life-saving, utterly benign way, in virtually all of those cases, I think I can get you there by some other way without the downside, or if not, that's just one of those cases where, yes, the fiction was more useful than any possible truth.
How do you distinguish a religious system from an a priori perceptual structure?
Well, if you can convert to it or away from it in a single conversation, I would say if it doesn't go very deep.
Well, you're only, I would say that for much of that, you're only converting at a very superficial level.
Well, no.
You're converting at the level of conscious apprehension, and most of your cognition is done through unconscious processing.
Well,
so it's superficial.
It's just a fact about us that most of people's religious attachment is born of having it drummed into them by their parents. Right? But the truth is...
no, their parents and their parents' parents and their parents'
yes,
parents'
exactly.
parents.
But if we did the same thing with Batman and Spider-Man, it would have the same effect. Right? Like if you relentlessly told children, right? I mean, I've got two little girls who are dressed up like Batgirl right now. They love Batgirl. There's nothing. I don't have to do anything to make them more enthusiastic about superheroes apart from just showing them the pictures of superheroes, right? If I told them, in addition to look how fun this is to dress up like Batgirl, in addition, you're going to burn in hell for eternity if you lose your emotional attachment to Batgirl, even for a minute, right? Well, then it's going to be Batgirl for the rest of their lives. Especially if the entire culture is doing likewise. And again, this is...
Well, as Brett pointed out already, a bad tool is better than no tool at all. And if Batgirl is the closest approximation to a divine figure that you can conjure up, it beats the hell out of none at all. And if Batgirl didn't partake of certain archetypal structures, no one would give a damn about Batgirl.
Okay, I'm going to...
Spider-Man and Batman
I'm going to spare
play a role in the culture.
All right.
Because, look,
Hold on.
not accidental. It's not accidental that superhero stories have a structure. And to say that, Batman and Spider-Man are obvious fictions and we could use them as moral exemplars, which we do.
You're taking the wrong end. You're taking the wrong end of this. I'm not I'm not minimizing the power of stories, right? I'm saying we can understand their power without recourse to believing things we shouldn't believe now in the 21st century.
I still need an answer to the question about what it is that's this transcendental rational structure without an a priori dogma, because I don't see it.
Well, it's not, well, again, we touched on this a little bit last night in that I freely admitted that in every domain of human inquiry, no matter how, I mean, the most hard-headed, so mathematics, logic, physics, at some point we have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. At some point we make a move that is not self-justifying and is not justified by any other move that's more rudimentary.
Right, that's a statement of faith. That thing that you just
but
laid out.
that's a callow use of the term faith.
No,
it's not the same kind of faith.
It's a precise definition of an axiomatic statement of faith.
My faith that 2 + 2 makes 4.
That's not faith.
Well, no, it is. No, it's my intuition that this is a valid and replicable and generalizable principle, right? You give
No,
me
that's
two
not faith either. Your statement that that's a useful claim is a statement of faith, but neither of those two were statements of faith.
No,
Those are
they're statements of
fact.
intuition. No, these are intuitions.